Hello everyone, it's Favorite Jam on Space here, and to those who like modern mythology or urban fantasy or that kind of thing, the name American Gods by Neil Gaiman is likely a name you recognize. It's a book that of course went on to become a TV show that got canceled after 3 seasons and all that jazz. However, I'm specifically talking about the book here today and not really discussing the TV show, as I want to go over why, in my opinion, the book isn't actually good. I mean that in a brutal sense. I don't think it's a good book. I think it's a pretty poor story, but I also wanted to say, this book bad, I want to actually go into why I believe it's a bad book and what could have improved it, both as just a fun retrospective on it, but also as a way for us to consider how to improve our own writing. Let's get into it. Now, some things I want to get over before I start talking about the major flaws with the book is just a few things here. That one, I'm not talking about Neil Gaiman as a person. We're not going to discuss the allegations or any crimes he has done or anything like that. We're just talking about the book and as a story. And two, I am assuming that you are at least mostly familiar with the premise of the book. If you are not, then I suggest you go watch the video by the Dom that kind of explains the plot of it. Or you preferably just read the book yourself. But overall, I just want to get this in another way, granting on the story. Now, my first major gripe with the book is actually Shadow himself. Now, the main character being a problem in a story is usually a trope associated with like fan fiction and that kind of thing. But here, it's actually more bad. Now, this is the case of Shadow being a Mary Sue who can do no wrong. Or that he has some trait that makes his character unenjoyable to read. It's that he doesn't have much of a personality or agency in his own story. Now, this can be broken down to two aspects. One about the personality isn't immediately obvious. One, if you start reading the book like I did, you'll be deeply invested in the first few chapters, and you won't immediately notice Shadow's lack of a personality. Some of it, now at first, you will subconsciously chalk it up to a form of shock and just everything coming at him so much it's hard for him to get a bearing. But the longer the story goes on, the more you realize Shadow doesn't actually have much of a personality. Like, I struggle to define what I'd say his traits actually are as a human being. I know he likes coin tricks, and he has some sense of justice, kinda, but it's not particularly notable or specific in any particular way. Like, he doesn't want, a monster who goes around killing kids to get away with it. That's, most people, honestly. And, his brief moments of heroics or good nature are either so basic that they don't really tell us who he is as a person, or they're kind of led on by other characters, so it's not really him being heroic, more like other people pointing him in the direction of what to do. And this is kind of what I mean by that, is that, you could have a character who is heroic, but in different ways. The Batman heroic versus the Superman heroic are two very different kinds of hero. But they're both heroes and even get along most of the time. But Shadow's heroics just are bland, and they aren't even that often. It's not like he's just kind of a flat character. He's not even a flat, basic character. I like Captain America a lot, but in many ways, he's a very basic character. But that works at his advantage. That's the role he plays. But Shadow is supposed to be this multi-layer, complex character who has interesting thoughts, hypothetically, on what's going on. Because remember, he's a simple man who just got out of jail, learned that his wife was cheating on him. And that every mythology is vaguely real, and there's a war between the new gods and the old gods, and a million other things flying at him. And I couldn't tell you much of his opinions on any of them. He says things, but they don't really mean things. He says stuff that is so incredibly basic that anyone would agree with them if you asked them, or just non-answers. And the book kinda lampshades this, where his wife openly points out that there'd be points where Shadow would just stand in a corner for hours and not really do anything. And this is also kind of confusing, as I'm not entirely sure if these are supposed to be instances where Shadow just isn't there, he's having some kind of episode and he's just not in his own body, or it's those moments we see in the book where he's monologuing to himself briefly and he's just not bothering to move a whole lot. I'm not sure if these are different instances or these are the same things, or this is really insight into ways thinking in those moments, but I just don't know. And that's a problem, because in this 500-page book, I don't know who the main character is. This gets exemplified horribly by at the end of the book, version of the book I have. It has several questions you could ask if you were part of a book club. And one of the questions it gives is, Shadow started out as a con man and all this, how did he change by the end of the book? And I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you how Shadow is a different person at the end of a book versus the start, because I could barely even tell you who he was at the start of the book. And by the end of the book, I don't even know what he's up to. And not like any, ooh, what's he doing? What crazy adventures he's getting up to now? It's like, I really don't know what he's doing. This guy, as a friend told me, this guy literally, when he got any choice of afterlife he could get, he chose the void. He chose not to exist and had to literally be drugged back into the story. And so many of his actions, the few actions he does make on his own, don't make sense. Why did he take the vigil for Odin? I don't know. Why does he hang out with half these people? I don't know. Why does he do anything? I don't know. Like, so many of his actions are either so basic, it's like, oh, I need to get food. Well, no, duh. Or actions that just don't make sense in a way that they don't confer any personality or motivation. And he is the main character. Yes, the book occasionally flips POVs, but he is supposed to be the main character. But he has so little agency in his own story. Most of the story is him doing stuff other people tell him to do. Which makes sense at the start, because you get the idea that Odin's kind of stringing him along, and then by the end, with the whole twist of Odin and Loki playing everyone, it kind of makes sense. But usually these stories have the end point, where the hero, at least at the very end, makes his own decision, decides his own fate. But that doesn't even happen in the book. Shadow just kind of does the obvious thing. There is no choice to be made, no real question to be answered. So Shadow is left a blank slate of a character. And a blank slate just isn't that good for a story, and it makes it kind of painful to read. But okay, the book is full of other characters, so maybe they can offset it, right? Right? Well, all the side characters in the book can usually be broken down to two groups, conveniently whether they're human or mythical or god, depending on how you're going to look at it, and both these categories have their own issues. With most exceptions, with most cases, most of the human characters he meets in the book are very one note. Like, he's the town sheriff, he's the old man, which I guess it turns out he's also a god too, so I guess that's a little bit of complexity. Like, you get this character and his wife, and his wife is probably one of the more complex characters, but even she's also confusing, and not like in a, oh, she's a multifaceted character with multiple motivations. More like she just switches randomly between motivations that just don't make sense. How she can switch sometimes between a loving, caring about Shadow to just barely tolerating him at very random points. And it just doesn't make sense. And Sam also is probably, like, her character is also a little inconsistent, but not as bad. But, like, there's so many other random human characters you think are going to matter, right? You think they're going to play a major part in his story. But outside of his wife, they really don't. They just exist when the plot needs them to exist, which is like 5 chapters. They'll show up in, say something, maybe do something, usually string Shadow along for one action or another, and then they'll just fade away because their plot significance wasn't relevant. I think it's very telling that outside of his wife, Lauren, none of the human characters are present for the final battle of the story, the final climax. They have no relevance. It's not even like Shadow's fighting for them. They mean nothing. And we spent so many chapters of him living in this small town, and so many chapters of him on the road meeting people, and you think some of this would matter, but it doesn't. But okay, this is a story about gods. It's called The American Gods, right? So surely the gods are the main focus. So how do they hold up? They don't hold up much better. Now, granted, most of them aren't one note. A lot of them have, well, some of them could be technically one note, but they have enough personality that they make them enjoyable. Like, even the most one-note characters like Tech Boy and Media have at least enough going on because they're somewhat archetypal that it kind of is interesting to see them bump around each other. Bump around each other is in very limited terms, however, as most of them don't make enough appearances to really be interesting. The exception to this being a Nazi, which I'm going to say one, and Chinnabog, who show up enough times to really have some importance to them. And to a little bit the Egyptian gods, because they show up enough times that they kind of have some presence, but not enough to really have like an arc or more than just window dressing half the time. And it overall comes down to this feeling that so much of it just doesn't matter. And that's not a good feeling, but like, I think to this point, right, where, like, a great example is with Kali. She has a few points in the book, mostly towards the beginning bit of it, where she points out how she's doing much well than the other old gods, and she doesn't really need to worry about this fight like they do, so that's why she doesn't want to join the war. But then Odin gets killed, and she joins the war, and shows up very briefly in the prelude to the battle, and then is never mentioned again to my entire knowledge. That's But okay, he's like, you think, there's a lot of gods you gotta go over, right? So surely some get more focused than others, and the ones that don't get focused, they can just play their bit part and go. But the problem is, so many of them have almost redundant roles. Like, Easter. Like, she exists, she's there, she does technically help revive Shadow, and then she just fades away from the battle, but her entire role feels superfluous when the story could have cut her out and nothing would have changed if Shadow just didn't choose the frickin' void, or if the land itself brought back, or any other number of ways to deal with this problem. And for the gods, they don't feel like gods or archetypal beings in a lot of ways. They just feel like people, like con men. Like, they could literally be tricking Shadow. Like, Shadow was just, like, if you, like, that's probably a decent theory that Shadow was just delusional, and these guys are just tricking him for some bizarre reason, and it would probably make more sense than half the book most of the time. Because, like, they're so weak. Like, there's an example where Loki / Mr. World kills Tech Boy, and with, like, a spear through, like, the gut, and Tech Boy is dead in, like, 10 seconds, which is so stupid because, like, a normal human being would survive getting stabbed in the gut longer than 10 seconds. Not, like, repeatedly, not with, like, some kind of spear that blows up your insides, just, like, a wooden spear, and he's dead in 10 seconds. I also must remind you that Tech Boy is supposed to be one of the major antagonists. And that gets to another problem, where the new gods, who are said to be these major antagonists, have, like, no screen presence. Like, the closest is media, with just, like, 1 or 2 scenes, but Mr. World has no real build-up, Tech Boy is a joke, and they're, like, Mr. Town's the closest they have to a strong rival, but even he is more like the human lackey of the new gods. But and even in the final battle, these supposed to be epic threats, right? They get taken out by Shadow's wife. Shadow does not even kill either his personal rival, like, close he gets to a personal human rival in Mr. Town, or the big bad Mr. World / Loki. His wife kills literally both of them. Shadow's role in the climax is completely redundant, which only makes the fact that like, there's an actual question people have asked of what the heck is the point of Shadow being in the story. Like, why did Odin and Loki bother messing with him? And I still don't know the answer to that question. But all of this could, but a lot of people point out that a lot of people like the idea of American gods, the world building, the concepts. So how does that hold up? Well, I'm gonna be honest, the world building of American gods make no freaking sense. And listen, this book definitely goes on the RPG silent approach of not all of it's gonna make perfect sense. There's a lot of conflicting stories and conflicting stuff going on here. And so it's more like you have to piece on the generals and not care about the specifics too much. But there are so many questions that just don't get answered properly. Like, for example, why do the old gods and new gods hate each other so much? Like, we get the idea that Loki and Odin were stirring up the fires of war, but this issue they had with each other is very present. But, like, why do they care? They presumably can draw upon different or the same resources and do just fine. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, and, like, this will be the main conflict of the book. It doesn't help that it just gets washed away when they realize, oh, Loki and Odin were tricking us? Okay, I guess we're gonna stop fighting, as if all of our previous issues didn't exist up to that point. It's just not weird. And then, like, how they exist doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. Like, it's, like, so, like, they're supposed to be, like, made from, like, the belief of humanity. There's this idea that if they aren't worshipped in some capacity, they will fade away and die. But that doesn't make sense because someone like Tech Boy, who's supposed to be super powerful because he is currently, quote-unquote, being worshipped, dies as easily as the old gods. So, they're not more powerful? And speaking of powers, what are their powers? Like, some of them have a few feats that are interesting, but most of them aren't terribly powerful. In fact, most of them would get dogged on by like, a few level 2 adventurers in D&D and pretty easily. They aren't they aren't powerful at all. They have a few party tricks at that. And that's not just the old gods who's really weaker. The new gods can't do this trick. They just don't seem to have that much power. Media unironically shows one of the most impressive ability just by being able to control television. She has the devastating ability to be able to control the channels. And, like, and then there's, like, so the story is supposed to be set in America. It's supposed to represent of American ideas. But, like, why aren't the Greek gods super powerful? Like, obviously we're ignoring Jesus and God from the Bible, because even by Neil Gaiman's own expression, he didn't know how to include them, and then I could have told them not counting. We're not getting into that, but like, why aren't the Greek gods powerful? The Greek gods are extremely well known in America. We literally build our government buildings based after their structures. We literally have a painting in the White House of like George Washington sitting among them. If being linked to a concept gives you power from that concept, the Greek gods should be stupidly powerful in this world. Like, honestly, I almost wanted the ending of the book being like new gods and old gods were gonna fight each other, and then like out of nowhere, like Poseidon's like, dude, get out, shoot, scram, get out of here. Just like shoots them all away. And it's like, and it's so like, and then even the final battle was so lame. Like, we don't even get to see the little like proxy battle here where a few of them died. We don't even know who died in the battle, and then it's just like, oh, we just go home and somehow everything's better now for no particular reason, even though all the problems they still had like exist, like I said before. And then like, and it comes to the ultimate theme. Well, the theme of this book is America, as Neil Gaiman put it. It was supposed to be a book about America in a way, but, and I'm gonna be honest here, I don't think he got America right. In fact, I think he got pretty damn wrong. And it's not because of this, that, or whatever. It's because the general theme book is everything is just decayed and awful. Like, every place Shadow goes is run down or has this going on or this going on. It's all depressing. It's all gloomy. And even places like Las Vegas, who I would not call a good place as far as like morals or virtues or anything, is still a place of light and excitement. Even the book, it comes off grim and depressing. Even the quote-unquote happy town Shadow spends so much time in, that's supposed to be somewhat idyllic in a lot of ways, is still shown to be this grim, cold, depressing place in a lot of ways. And that's the entire book. We never get the contrast. We never get the contrast of this. And it doesn't help that the one major scene set outside of America, which is the epilogue in Iceland, doesn't have this depressing mood. It's much more light, and much more exciting in a thematic way. So I'm just as an American, as someone who lives in in a very rundown area of the nation, West Virginia's by far not the richest state. We're pretty poor and all that jazz. This kind of depression everywhere is certainly not the American experience. Sure, some places are like that, but America's a big place, and just that book did not capture it. For all this talk about the American gods, how these ideas are supposed to be how America views things, it doesn't. It does not fit actual American culture or belief in any conceptual way. Like, why aren't the Native American beings way more powerful? A lot of Americans carry a lot of random Native American beliefs that would be supercharging them. Or why aren't there more like beings of just overall, in fact, why even are the old gods so weak? America is pretty well established in understanding the stories and the myths. And the book opening, and you get questions like that. And then America's a diverse place with a lot of religions and different beliefs, and they kind of touch on that with Kali being powerful, or at least more powerful than the other old gods. But it just doesn't come across. This is like a depressing, grayed out version of America, filtered through the ideas where the abstract ideas of archetypal gods cannot draw strength from a land where everything is depressing. And that's not American, and it doesn't make for a good read. So overall, that's my opinions on American Gods. It's not the worst book. It has a lot of decent traits about it. It's well written, Chinnabog's arc was good, but overall, it's not a very good book. I can see the points where I can see ideas, interesting concepts, things that could be explored very interestingly, but it just doesn't come across. It just does not work. I don't really know how this book got so popular when an objective look through it does not reveal much of substance. At the end of the day, I don't know what this book is trying to say, and its plot isn't interesting. The only thing I can think of say is that America is a place where even the abstract concept of gods can exist, and that's both not true and not interesting. Overall, that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy this video. Comment if any thoughts you have on the book or my take on it. And dislike and comment if you don't like my video and all that jazz. Anyway, I will see you all next time.